Hello, debating metalheads. It's been a bit, but we're back with another exciting episode of Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co-host, Chris K. Today, we're doing something we haven't done in quite a while. We're doing a head-to-head. And because it's been a bit, it's not just any head-to-head. This one goes back to the beginning, sort of, kind of. Today, we're pitting Black Sabbath's final album, 13, against its step-sibling, Heaven and Hell, The Devil You Know. Both heavy, both sludgy, but only one wins.
In 2006, the Dio era lineup of Black Sabbath reunited to record 3 new songs to be included in a Black Sabbath Dio Years compilation. The 4, including Tony, Geezer, Ronnie, and Vinny Appice, felt so good about working together again that they formed a new band under the moniker Heaven and Hell and recorded The Devil You Know. The subsequent tour would be Ronnie's last, as he was diagnosed with stomach cancer shortly thereafter and passed away in May 16, 2010. About a year and a half later, the original Black Sabbath convened at the famed Whisky A Go-Go to announce that they would be reuniting with plans to record a new album and tour without Bill Ward. 13 was released in 2013, and their final tour followed. On this episode, we pit the final albums of these 2 legendary versions of Black Sabbath's careers to see which one we think is the better album.
But before we start, remember to click on the like or subscribe button on your device or wherever you get your podcast so you can listen to Debating Metal as soon as we publish a new episode or whenever you feel like. Black Sabbath is the topic. Everyone that we're talking about tonight was in Black Sabbath, but to avoid confusion, because, Black Sabbath with Ozzy was a thing again, sort of, kind of. Tony and Ronnie and Geezer and Vinny decided, we're going to, have a little bit of play on our name, and we're going to name ourselves Heaven and Hell. So they created an album called The Devil You Know. Black Sabbath would go on to make an album called 13. So The Devil You Know obviously happened to be their last album, the one and only. I mean, they released 2 live albums, but the one and only studio album because of Ronnie's passing, where 13 for Black Sabbath just ended to be their last album because, quite frankly, as we've seen, Ozzy can't do it anymore.
Even though he keeps trying.
He keeps trying. I mean, the guy could sit down and sing. I mean, that's obvious, but he can't perform.
Touring and all the other stuff, yeah, it's not the same. I mean, he's getting up there in age, and he's wrecked his body multiple times with substances, etc. So it's totally understandable. And I think if you're listening to this and you're comparing them, obviously yes, they went under the name Heaven and Hell, but most Sabbath fans, especially Dio era Sabbath fans, would consider this the last album of that lineup of the band, right? So it's a technicality, but this is really kind of Black Sabbath versus Black Sabbath in a way.
Pretty much. I mean, it's just 2 different eras of Black Sabbath going up against each other.
Yeah, I mean the Heaven and Hell lineup did 3 albums together. The only exception being the actual album Heaven and Hell, which had Bill Ward on it. So.
Right, exactly. So, and even then, like Bill, I think Bill stopped halfway during the tour, or I don't remember exactly if he left in the middle of the tour, or if he finished the tour and then Vinny joined. I don't remember. I think it was he left in the middle of the tour and then Vinny came on board.
I believe you're correct.
Okay, which was funny. Just so kind of completely out of the blue, we were talking about you and I. Earlier today, we were talking about that Drumeo video with that girl who did Ronnie's Dio's Holy Diver. So they were talking about the fact that the drummer on Holy Diver was Vinny Appice, but they called him Vinny Appice. And
who called him that on the video?
The guy in the video called him Vinny Appice.
I mean, right? It's not. I guess it's not technically wrong. They're both named Appice, right? Well, but it's Carmine Appice and right. Vinny Appice.
Yeah. Right, and his sister is the only one that uses the actual pronunciation, which is Appice. So it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
It's all marketing and just trying to avoid, the judgment of the time period, and now it doesn't really matter, but that's just where they're at.
I don't know. I don't think anyone ever really had a, there was nothing you could ever say against Italians back in the day because, you never knew who would come after you.
It's a completely valid point. I think people overthought it a lot of times, and maybe producers and stuff go, we can't have you out there as a peachy. You need to be a piece, or something. I don't know.
It's just very strange how all three pronounce it differently.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Black Sabbath 13. I'm going to talk about this album. We're going to talk about the songs, and then we're going to jump into the songs for Heaven and Hell and The Devil You Know, and we're going to basically critique them, and at the end we're going to sit there and say how we feel. Now, unlike other podcasts that may do something very similar to this, we're not doing this song for song, line for line, because I don't think that necessarily is the right way to do it. Because if the best
you hear that
song,
all other podcasts, you're wrong.
well, I mean, think about it. Like for instance, if you go with Holy Diver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's a good line. Well, how do you feel about that line?
uh, when you think about song number 7 is Rainbow in the Dark. I think the album only has 8 songs on it. So usually the end of an album is not the better songs, but Rainbow in the Dark, Ronnie actually didn't like the song. That's why the song was number 7, but it ended up being one of his biggest hits, if not the biggest that he's had as a solo artist. So, if you put that, up against song number 7 from, I guess, The Last in Line or whatever it may be, or whoever you're going to compare it to, it might be a better song. So I don't like those
Isn't it
kinds
funny?
of head-to-head things.
Isn't it funny though how sometimes these artists don't think that a song's gonna amount to much, and then it ends up being huge, like just completely escaping what they thought it would be. Like, I was watching something about Rod Stewart, and he was talking about how what's that song, Maggie May.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
he think it would be a hit, but it was, in fact, it was the B-side of single, and some radio guy heard the song and thought, "Wow, this is awesome," and started playing it, and then it spread and spread and spread, and it became one of his biggest hits. And so, like, there's so many instances of that happening with bands, especially like metal bands. Like, they don't think something's gonna be a hit, and it just blows up.
And what's funny is that something like that really can't happen today because
Yeah,
one they don't provide 7-inch singles. They just give you a digital copy of one song, so
yeah.
there's nothing to flip. And second, like if someone went against what they were told to do, they'd probably get fired. So those
Or
kinds of things just
murdered.
those kinds of things just don't happen today. It's almost impossible.
It's a different way of doing things, and people release singles instead of albums, or it's metal. I think holds on to a lot of the old values of the way of doing music, and I don't know if that's good or bad. And but we like what we like, so.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Black Sabbath's 13 album. The album was released on June 10th, 2013 on Vertigo Records. It was produced by Rick Rubin. It was recorded at Shangri-La Studios in Malibu, California, and Tone Hall in Lapworth, England. Those performing on the album are Ozzy Osbourne on vocals and harmonica, Tony Iommi on guitars, Geezer Butler on bass, and Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave on drums. As you mentioned earlier, Bill Ward decided to sit out the tour, the reunion tour, and then the album, and a lot of it. It was a lot of back and forth between the two sides. One side saying that he just wasn't up to snuff in terms of his performance, while Bill was saying it was all about money. I believe Bill. I don't know about you.
I tend to believe Bill too.
I mean, it's just really as simple as this. Split it 4 ways. Why was that so hard?
Agreed.
You
So
know?
be the
Oh,
answer.
yes, greed is but greed on whose part? I don't even think it's greed on Ozzy's part so much as it was greed on Sharon's part. But, that's opinion that, I could sit there and state to a million times, but we'll never know the truth. But I'm pretty close. I'm pretty sure I'm close to it. But that's just my opinion.
The truth is out there.
It's out there somewhere, but it's hidden under a rock somewhere. Anyway, the first song in the album is called "End of the Beginning." Um, let's see how do I put this? This is a slow. This is a slow.
It's called End of the Beginning.
This whole album is relatively slow. So this one is a slow, plodding song for the first 2.5 minutes. It picks up the pace a little bit, and the riff changes to one of those classic Black Sabbath style riffs. Then it slows down again around 5:15, and it kind of becomes that's like a trademark Black Sabbath type thing where it's slow, it picks up, and it slows down again, and there's a different riff in the guitar solo, and then it just kind of all culminates towards the end and then kind of slows down and repeats the beginning. That is a typical Black Sabbath style thing that they've done over the years. What was your take on this song?
So in a lot of ways the same. I mean, but like the biggest thing that stuck out to me is that it was kind of harkening back to the original Black Sabbath sound. Kind of slow plodding, like you said, but with that evil sound, very doomy in the beginning. Then it kind of takes off into that riff, like you said, like where it becomes a kind of a classic Black Sabbath riff. But I thought it was more like it reminded me a lot of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, kind of in the middle. Whereas the beginning reminded me of more what was the first album's Black Sabbath. Jeez. And then like, I really like the chorus. I like the solo that follows the chorus. And then what I really noticed about it was, it starts off sounding kind of like early Black Sabbath. It goes into, kind of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, so about 5-6 albums in. And then towards the end, if you listen to the way the recording's done, like as the song goes, it kind of evolves and it sounds more modern towards the end, which is really interesting to me. Like, so I don't know if it was intentional or if it was just something that happened, but it feels like you go through kind of an evolution of their history in a way through listening through the song.
That's an interesting take on it, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but I can see what you're talking about now.
Yeah, I mean, even the drum style changes as the song goes on a little bit, so it's really interesting to listen. So I would suggest giving it a second listen under those guidelines, really, and just like listen to it for yourself, and if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I will do that because I've listened to this thing a million times. It's just, and I listened to it for several days in a row, each album, and there was a point in time where I was like, I can't keep like doing this to myself because it's sometimes it's a tough when it's certain situations it's a tough listen. Other situations when you want to have that kind of thing where you in that kind of mood, it fits great, you
Yeah.
know. But then other times where you just want to be a little bit more upbeat, you're just like, this thing's dragging me down, man. It's like you just don't want it. Anyhow, song number 2, God is Dead, question mark. And I say it that way because in parts of the song, there's a question. In other parts of the song, it sounds like a statement. So it depends on where you're listening to the song, or what part of the song you're listening to, really. Again, slow, plodding intro. This is a slow song, but what's really interesting about this one is that to me, the verses are not very plotting in the same sense. I really like the melody that make up the verses. There's a syncopation about them that's pretty cool. Um, at the 620 mark of the song, the riff picks up the pace, and then the verse melody changes a little bit. So there's that kind of, again, typical Black Sabbath style where something goes on for a certain amount of time, and then all of a sudden we're going to go ahead and change it, and then go back to what it originally was. That's the kind of style that they have. The riff that it has got a very, very familiar feel to it. And to me, it goes all the way back to their 70s stuff, before it goes back into the first riff that you heard at the beginning of the song. So there's a lot of reminiscence to the old stuff that they did in the 70s. So I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. It's a very slow build, this one. Song's pretty long, but it eventually kind of takes up off into a gallop, like you mentioned, where it's there's some interesting syncopation. But I feel like it does go on a bit too long. I think if you cut this song down to about 5 minutes, it'd be a lot better. But I do really enjoy the lyrics. Like there's one line, "Give me the wine, you keep the bread." I kind of like that. Like the bread and wine. Biblical reference there.
Yeah, the Last Supper reference.
Yeah, there you go. So I find good and bad things about it, but for the most part, I do like the song.
Yeah, it's okay. It's good. It's okay. All right, number 3 is the song "Loner." This one kind of is a little different. It starts out with a little bit, to me, there's something about it that makes it feel like, or reminds me of, NIB. Back from I guess it's Paranoid. It was the second album. Or was it off the first album? No, it was off of. That was the first album. Yeah, well, they both came out the same year. So, um, once the verse starts, it kind of loses that feel, even though the riff hasn't changed, and that's because the melody of verse doesn't follow the riff, which is very similar in NIB. The riff for the bass line was right. So it had that rhythm, and the vocals went right along with it. Where this one is kind of more like traditional kind of song where you have a riff and you're just got a vocal melody that's different than that. However, similarly, the song has a break in which the music slows down, the drums stop, very similar to NIB, where there's just kind of like a little break in the middle. And around the 240 mark, it hits that odd time signature thing, throws in a solo, and then it goes back to the regular song. So there's a lot going on in this song, and I think it's good, but I think the song itself as a whole probably could be a little bit better.
That's kind of where I was feeling. Like I don't feel like it's particularly cohesive. It's the shortest track so far at 5 minutes, but the best things about it are the main riff, and then the guitar solo, like right at the midpoint. I think is pretty awesome. I think if the song had like more of that section, like the riff that occurs right before the solo, and then maybe like another solo, like there is one more, like the last solo in the song probably is my favorite part of the album thus far. But my problem with the song as a whole is it's like a lot of ideas, but it doesn't feel particularly cohesive.
Right, exactly. That's kind of what I was getting at. All right, so in song number 4 is Zeitgeist. So now this song is a little bit different. This is where, they have the old style Black Sabbath where, in the middle of, you're getting this heavy riffing, all of a sudden you get, the end of, what song is it?
Aquarius.
No. um the little acoustic ending that was it. It's not
It sounds like Planet Caravan to me. Like I
right.
see.
It has that kind of melancholic feel to it. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
it is. This is a melancholic blues song. Very minimal instrumentation. There's bongos, there's tambourine, acoustic and clean guitar, and there's some keyboards going on in there. But when yeah, that sounds like a whole bunch of instrumentation when you think about it. But think about what a full band sounds like. Bass, drums, and all that stuff going on. Just a simple simple bongos and tambourine is your basic percussion, and then you have acoustic guitars layered with some clean guitar. So it's a really interesting song. Ozzy's vocals on this one is is really different. It's very distant sounding. It's stripped of any kind of like bass or anything like that. It's almost like he's singing through like a transistor radio to some degree, but not distorted like Nine Inch Nails like to make vocals distorted, but just very distant sounding and stripped. So it's an interesting song. I kind of like it, in that sense. If you're in the mood for that kind of like a Planet Caravan kind of song.
Yeah, it's kind of psychedelic and bluesy, and it has that kind of like cool, chill vibe to it. I don't really get the song title. Maybe it's like maybe something personal, because I mean zeitgeist would be like the definition is the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs at the time. When I think back to 2013 when I listened to this album, I was like trying to comprehend what this song, entails about that. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm sure there's some reason behind it. But as a whole, it's a kind of a reference back to like say Planet Caravan and some of the other, songs of that time. Again, this album's very retro in that way. It's trying to achieve something where they're recalling the past. And I think this is one of the songs that we're like these first four songs feel like that's what they're trying to accomplish. So I guess we'll see where it's going with the remaining four of the main album.
Well, that being the case, we're moving on to Age of Reason, and I don't see any reason to talk much about this song. It is the theme of the album, slow plodding. I don't. It's not very memorable to me. I mean, Tony always plays great guitar and great guitar solos, but as far as the overall vibe of this song, it just doesn't do it for me.
Oh, that's wild, because I literally I said this is probably the best song on the album.
See, now I definitely don't think that.
Here's where I have issues with it. I don't like the drum production. I feel like the drums are way off from where they should be. I really like the lyrics. It's very heavy and it feels like Old Sabbath. Like the last 2 minutes of the song in particular, a really kick-ass instrumental section. The solo to me is the best on the album. It reminds me of something off of Heaven and Hell, maybe off of like what was that? Was a Wishing Well or something like that. And I actually really love Geezer's mix on this song. Like he's more prominent on this particular song than some of the others. And so like one other thing is it gets towards the end, and the way that the song goes out, there's kind of an orchestral backing track that I feel like gives it a little bit of epicness. Like I'm kind of sad you don't like it, because like I feel like honestly this was the first more creative song on the album, whereas everything else to me felt like just kind of going through the motions of trying to recall the past.
Maybe it was just because I was having burnout of the slow plodding songs that I didn't give it enough of a chance, and I'll try and do that, and then I'll come back on another episode and say whether I like it again or not.
I think like listen to it with some headphones and like really listen to the way the bass mixes with everything, and listen to the actual lyrics, or maybe like read the lyric sheet as you go. Like there's a lot of like for me, a lot of it is I'm trying to get the old experience of listening to it with headphones, um, reading the lyrics as I'm going, and just really experiencing the album. And I think that works for me. And I know not everybody has the time to do that. Like I barely do. But it's a different way of experiencing it. So I think give it another try. I can certainly understand the burnout. Like I'll talk more about that later as we get towards like the end of these albums, but it's something that's totally expected because there is so much sameness as you go.
Right. Well, now you're talking about what you thought was your favorite song on the album, but for me, number 6, "Live Forever," that song right there to me is my favorite song on the album. Um, this song to me fits very nicely within the Black Sabbath catalog. It feels as though it could have been written back in the early '70s around the Sabotage time. So much so, I believe that there's a big similarity to this song and "Hole in the Sky," specifically the riff part. It's a little bit more sped up, but I think the riff, to me, there's a hint or a whiff of "Hole in the Sky." I mean, I think the riff is outstanding. It's typical Iommi, and the transitions from up tempo to slow tempo, um, to me, really work well on this song. So I give this song as my favorite on the album.
Okay. I mean, I don't like it as much, but I do really like it. I kind of said the same thing. I said it's right in the pocket of that old Sabbath sound. It didn't feel um what am I trying to say here? It didn't feel necessarily derivative of their earlier work, but it felt like it could have been written for that time period. So if that makes sense, like
Hmm.
kind of the
Yeah.
early first 6 albums, especially kind of more towards the middle, um, second, third, fourth album. So it's not necessarily one of my favorites, but I did like it more than some of the stuff we heard in the first half of the album.
Right. Exactly. Definitely for me on that one.
Yeah.
All right. We move on to song number 7, which is "Damaged Soul." Um, man, I gotta tell you, this is one slow and heavy as hell blues number.
Mm-hmm.
This is what, when you go to a place like New Orleans that has this famous for the blues, and you find this little side street, and there's this noise coming out of this one little space. You hear this song. I mean, it is so heavy, it is so sludgy and slow, but it is as blues can get, and it's just really, really good to me. I like the song a lot. I kind of laughed when I first heard it because it's got that backmasking intro where the tape is flipped backwards before it goes normal. I mean, I like the song. It's really cool blues. I mean, Tony is just wailing away throughout the song, and so I like the way this song came out.
Yeah, I mean it's super bluesy. Probably the heaviest blues song I've ever heard. Um, here's though where I really noticed something that was bothering me about the album. And so it's the phrasing of Ozzy's vocals. It's really repetitive. He sings one line higher and then descends towards the last word. And then the opposite. He starts low and then walks up the scale to the word. He does this over and over and over through the album. And so it's the same pattern. He starts high, goes low, and then low towards high. And it's just every other phrase. And so it starts to feel like, man, we're just really walking through the motions here. That being said, there are some really positive things about the song itself. Like that was more of a criticism of the full album and not the song itself. It was just kind of really when it was hitting me. So one thing I like is I'm glad to hear the harmonica again because that's a staple of early Sabbath. It's a really nice touch like that for me stuck out big time. The first solo is like super soulful. It's an excellent moment on the album. One of my favorite solos on the album, to be honest. And then the second one is pretty good, but it leads into like another kind of harmonica part that's a faster pace. Like I thought it was a great way to end the track. So again, it's less a criticism of the song that I was bringing up, but more just as the album went on as a whole, like something just kept kind of like hitting me about this, and then by that point, it was like just painfully obvious.
I kind of understand what you're talking about there, because there are a lot of things about this that just it's about this album and the Devil You Know, that is just a lot of repetition. We'll put it that way.
Mm.
So moving into the last song on the regular edition of the album is Dear Father. Um, Another heavy riff, another slow plotter. The riff is very cool, however. It's very heavy. And I mean, there's not a lot to distinguish this song from a lot of the other slow plotters throughout the album. But what I do like about this song is that when you get to the end, you start to hear sounds of a storm. You hear thunder, lightning, and rain. And this song ends the album as Black Sabbath began the first Black Sabbath album. So it's really a poignant touch how
Yeah, it's
it,
a little
it,
poetic.
it basically, puts a bow on the career or the recording career of Black Sabbath.
So, like, yeah, I'm in a mostly complete agreement with you there. Like, I would say there's so many technically good songs, but the formula is just so consistent. By this time, like, you've heard the song, you feel like you've heard the song time and again. Like, you're 8 tracks in, and there's a lot of consistency there. To me, it's honestly better than a lot of the others. Like, I think the second half of this album is so much better tracked than the first half. Um, and I think it's kind of a shame that it sits at track eight in a way, because I feel like that means probably a lot of people missed it. But like you said, it's a really cool way to exit the album, considering it's Black Sabbath's last. Um, for the ending of their career, I think it's a solid choice out of these tracks. So
Yeah, I put it that way. So we're not going to talk much about the bonus tracks. I know you have a little bit to say about them.
I can just kind of run through them real quick.
Right. I mean, I will say this. I was pretty cool. So the next, I have 3 songs. I think there was
There's 4.
there's 4.
Mhm.
So Methodemic is the next one that we're going to talk about real quick. It's on the deluxe edition. It's lyrics written by Ozzy. I mean, he goes all the way back to his Bark at the Moon phase, and he
Yeah,
writes a song.
yeah. I mean,
Here we go again.
yeah. I mean, I think he wrote the guitars and the drums and everything too, but they
Well,
didn't list that. But it's just my suspicion, because I
no,
know
but
Ozzy can do
they
all those things.
they did list that all the songs in the album were written by Geezer, Tony, and Ozzy. So
Yeah,
that's obviously questionable. But in this particular case, he wrote the lyrics to this song. So
yeah.
and so I think that's pretty cool. Go ahead and talk a little bit about the songs.
So, Methodemic, I think this is the kind of track that would have really helped the pacing of the main album. It's faster, has heavy attack, and would have been kind of topical. Like 2013 was the end of Breaking Bad. So it would have been really good to be on the album. I think it's better than being relegated to a bonus track. If you fit it in some like earlier places in the album, maybe like track 2, track 3, or something like that, it would have really given it like some nice energy and still fit in very well.
They should have put this right after God Is Dead.
Probably, yeah.
I mean,
Honestly,
this song should have been on the album. I don't know why it wasn't.
I 100% agree there. Peace of Mind. I kind of see why it didn't make the cut. It's not a bad song by any means, but it feels like a lot of the other songs of the album. Kind of down to like the vocal idiosyncrasy I was talking about earlier, where he, goes up the scale, down the scale, that kind of thing. That being said, like I think, the last 30 seconds of the track would have stood out more than some of the other stuff that was there. Like, sitting at 3 minutes 46 seconds, like I would rather have it than some of the 7-minute songs on the album. So maybe that would have been good.
Yeah, they
Pariah.
well,
Oh,
before you get to Pariah, I mean, the distinguishing, with Peace of Mind, there was already 6 other songs like this on the album. It's like,
yeah, that's.
so it's like, let's throw another one on there. And
I kind of think it's better than a couple of the ones that made it on the first half. So
yeah, I do recall that, because it's like, I thought, listening to the bonus tracks, I'm like, all right, well, you know what? These songs are actually better than stuff that's already on there, which is like, what happened here? Because that's usually not the case.
yeah.
There's Pariah.
Well, Pariah is where that kind of falters, though. I would say, it's really another mixed bag. I like the solo, and the main riff's not bad. The lyrics just do nothing for me. He rhymes Messiah with Pariah about 400 times, kind of back and forth until the end, and it just kind of drones on. Definitely should not have been on the album.
I think in a song like that, what happens to me, this is like an unfinished song, because
Yeah, exactly that.
you got a really cool mid-tempo track. I
The
mean,
track itself is good. It's the
yeah, like
lyrics that suck.
everything. The song itself is good. I mean, it doesn't really have a great chorus, so it does not. It's not memorable in that regards. And yes, the lyrics are kind of weak, so it's kind of like, well, they could have finished the song. They probably could have made it better
Exactly.
if they gave themselves a little bit more time, and probably put it on the album. So an album
They
that
would have been
had
on 20, or they would have been on 14.
right. Well, I mean, think about, if they've got 8 songs, right? If they either take one off, or they just add these, because it's not like, they don't have 79 minutes and 78, 79
Yeah.
minutes and however many seconds to get to a full album, full CD. It's like, they could have put more, you know,
I could have
and
put one more track and it would have been 13 tracks and it would
that
have made sense.
that too, exactly.
Um okay, so the last one is it was an exclusive. I can't even remember where the exclusive came from, but I remember I sourced the track through completely legal means. Um So it's called Naivety in Black. So a play on Nativity in Black. To me, it's way off in sound from everything else, and so it's kind of clear why it's a bonus track. Like, I like it. I think, again, the drumming is kind of weak here. It to me, it honestly feels more like a Dio era track. Like, maybe Tony wrote it when he was working on some stuff with Heaven and Hell, or maybe even Dio before, when they were doing the Black Sabbath reunion stuff. I'd love to have, heard Dio sing this one. But that being said, it's not a bad track. It doesn't fit on the album.
There, fair enough. I haven't heard it, so I can't really speak on it.
All right.
So, interesting thing. Okay, so I'm looking at the production work. Okay, so as we all know, we said it was produced by Rick Rubin, and Rick Rubin has, for everyone out there who knows, Rick Rubin has this thing about resurrecting people's careers. He did it with Johnny Cash, did it with Neil Diamond. I mean, some people could sit there and say he did it with Metallica. That's debatable. But I mean, the one thing I can always say about a Rick Rubin produced album is it's always going to sound good. There's a good sound to this album. There may be some faults along the way. That happens pretty much with every album, but it's definitely a good sounding production. I mean,
Mhm.
Greg Fiddleman is the engineer on this, or the main engineer. Greg Fiddleman, obviously, we all know, is basically working for Metallica now on a full time basis. So there's also a guy who shows up on both albums, Mike Exeter, I think is how you pronounce it. He's an engineer. He's a recording engineer who happened to do keyboards on The Devil You Know, but he also did some production and engineering on that album as well. So there's some interesting links here, as far as Mike playing on, or performing or producing or engineering on both albums, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, while Rick has a knack for getting the best out of people, he also has a knack for rubbing artists the wrong way. And in this particular case, Black Sabbath didn't quite jive with what he was trying to do. And I understand that because Tony, you know, fuck, Tony's Tony, right? So why mess with Tony? Well, what ended up happening was Rick wanted to get that old shitty sounding Black Sabbath sound from the 70s. And, he tried to convince Tony to use old amps. And so, Tony's like, no, I don't want to use an old amp. So he walks into the studio next day and there's a whole variety of old amps. And so when they asked, the interviewer asked him, so what did you do? He goes, I played them and they all sounded like shit. So I didn't play on any of them. It's, people move on from certain things. And so while Rick got what he wanted to some extent in terms of the songwriting, um, I don't think he got what he wanted as far as production in terms of Tony's sound, which I'm glad because Tony has a really good sound by himself anyway. So
So as far as how I felt about it, like there are things I really like. I think in many ways, they traveled back in time to their early days, but I don't really care for the drum sound. Is it like it fails in that regard? It's nothing against Brad Wilk. I think he's a great drummer. Right, they recorded him like how they intended to, but I think it's a miss. It doesn't have that punch of the early Black Sabbath stuff. It feels way too modern. I do feel like the back end of the album just way outplays the first half. So I think that probably turned off a lot of people. If you go through 4 songs and you just find it okay, you're probably not going to listen to the second set of 4 songs. I do feel like, I missed out by not giving this album a better chance when I listened to it years ago, because I'm probably guilty of that. I listened to the first few tracks and went like, oh, this is kind of boring, and probably never really listened to much again. So I'm glad I did this. Like, going through it again, I found more stuff to like. Um, you know, um, it's just kind of missing that big riff that sets it apart. Like I don't, if I really think about it, there's a lot of stuff to enjoy, and it feels like one of those albums from a band you go like, there's cool riffs and this and that, but nothing stands out to me. There's no single. It's just kind of like a low B or a C for me. But it is still better than I gave it credit for in the past.
no, I could see where you're coming from with that. I mean, there's a lot of issues just because the band really leaned into the thing that that's out there in the ether,
Mm.
that Black Sabbath created doom metal. Okay, I mean, if you listen to all their albums, while they do have elements of what became doom, there's also elements of heavy metal, there's also elements of speed, there's also elements of thrash, there's
Mm.
all these elements of metal that are in there, and not just one. And then in this particular, in both these albums, really, they really leaned into that doom part. And I think that's where the albums were doomed. Because they didn't seem like they were going to really be successful as a whole if they're going to stay in that style. And that's a tough thing, but we still
Yeah.
have to talk about Heaven and Hell and the Devil You Know, and we'll express more of that feeling in a little bit when we go into it.
Okay.
Are you ready to go into it?
Let's go into it.
All right, so Heaven and Hell, The Devil You Know, was released on April 27th, 2009 on Rhino Records. It was produced by Ronnie James Dio, Tony Iommi, and Geezer Butler. It was recorded at Rockfield Studios in Wye Valley, Wales. Performing on the album is Ronnie James Dio on vocals, Tony Iommi on guitars, Geezer Butler on bass, Vinny Appice on drums, and as I mentioned, Mike Exeter, who was was a producer and an engineer on the album. He also played keyboards. And that shows up prominently in one of the songs towards the back half of the album. All right, man. It's your show. Take it away.
All right, so the album starts off with Adam and Evil. The first thing that hit me was how haunting Dio's vocals could be. Like sometimes when I step away from listening to anything with Dio for a while, I kind of forget how just how good he was. Then the drums really hit me. Like they just nailed the production on Vinny's drums to sound like they always had. There's a little bit of discrepancy there with Dehumanizer, back when they did that because it was a more mechanical sound intentionally. But like in the grand scheme of that era of Black Sabbath, they nailed Vinny's sound, so I was happy about that. Especially coming after I listened to 13 first, and the drums, like I said, no discredit to Brad Wilk, but just really felt like a miss for me. So this was nice to hear at least. I love the double tracking on the vocals when it happens. There's a few parts of that where it was really cool. And the Doom sound is like definitely, obviously this is several years before 13. So, there had been several things, like even when the Black Sabbath reunion happened with Ronnie and they recorded those 3 songs, there was a little bit of that Doom sound happening. So maybe that was just kind of where Tony was finding his bread and butter in his later years. But I think it's a good start to the album, to be honest.
I like the play on words with Adam and Evil. And the song itself for me, again, as we mentioned and we've kind of reiterated over and over again, it's in that Doom style, slow and plodding. I think, the performance of the 4 players, there's nothing that can be denied about how well they perform together. There's nothing that we can deny about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's very cohesive.
Right. There's a chemistry that those 4 guys have, and it's evident on this entire album. But the chemistry doesn't supersede the songwriting. You can have all the chemistry in the world, but if the songwriting is not good, the songwriting is not good. So if there's something lacks in the song, or the song just kind of goes nowhere, while it may be a great performance, might not necessarily be a great song. And in this particular case, I think the song is a little boring for me because it is along those same lines of, I've listened to this style of music now for 2 albums, and it's like, I'm tired of that. It's like I can only bang my head that slow for so long.
I mean, that's almost doing it a discredit, because it's like you listen to a bunch of songs in the same style and it's maybe not necessarily your thing. So it's taking away from the experience of listening to it.
In that, but I listened to it today and I'm like, yeah, here it is. It's still slow and plodding. So, it's not, again, it's not that it's bad. Because, there's a whole group of people out there who love doom metal, and that's what they listen to. And this is probably, the most iconic album to them. That's great. That's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to take away from it at all. It's just that for me, I can only take it so much. It's like, and I'm going to say this out loud. I can only take Slayer so much before I have to change it to something else, So it's the same thing.
Announcing our Slayer worst depression.
So it's just a thing. Anything. That's why I like diversity on an album, and there is some diversity on this album. Don't get me wrong. There is. I think there's more diversity on this album than on 13. But at the same time, all of a sudden I'm going from 13, even though 13 came out afterward, I'm going from 13, who has 6 songs on the album that are pretty much the same as Adam and Evil, and I'm listening to Adam and Evil. I'm like, God damn it, So, anyway, let's move on.
All right, so track 2 is Fear. I love the chorus. It's really something only Dio could pull off. It's so dissonant, and it kind of tricks your mind. Dio had this mastery of kind of dropping down a half step that leads you in a different direction that like you would logically think. So he would do things where he would sing, a line that was, your mind immediately thinks it's just going to follow a major chord or a minor chord, but then he would do something slightly different that you go what, and listen to it, again and again, and it's just so impressive. Like Dio was just a master of that kind of stuff. So for me, it like kind of tickled a part of the brain while I'm listening to it, and I just thought it was a really cool song. It doesn't stand out. Yeah, it's not a single or anything like that, but it's technically has some really cool aspects to it, and I love Tony Solo kind of making this one of my favorite tracks on the album. It was one I had to listen to a couple times to like just really grasp and appreciate.
This one is weird for me, and I mean the tempo definitely picks up. It's still a little bit of slow, still slow on the slower side. And the riff is cool, and yeah, I agree with you that there's a mastery behind what Ronnie does when it comes to his vocal lines and stuff like that. I just think a one word chorus when you're yelling fear. He has a unique way of doing it, and for me it doesn't do it. I don't know. There's something about it that just did not click with me on
Mhm.
this particular track. So for whatever reason, yes, he has all these tricks that he does, and yes, he's good at all that stuff. He's great at all that stuff. It's just for whatever reason it didn't really click with me.
Okay, fair enough. Track 3 is going to be Bible Black. This is the single of the album. It hits hard, while it's totally listenable at the same time. It's memorable. It's kind of exciting while being thoughtful and interesting. Dio's age comes out a little bit when he sings like, some of the higher parts. But I think it almost plays to the strength of the album because it gives it like this layer of emotion, almost like when Johnny Cash got older. You could hear some of that age, which wasn't a bad thing. It was interesting. So, it's another really good solo. It's like to me, this is of all the songs we've listened to with these two albums, like this one sticks out to me as a single.
So what's funny? This song is slow and heavy and a plotter. It's just like all the other songs. It's good, but there's something different about it. Um, Maybe it's Dio's performance, and I don't think there's anybody on this planet who can say the word black the way that Ronnie does and make it so emphatic and almost evil to some degree. The way
Mhm.
he would say, Bible black. I mean, it was just emphasis
Yeah,
that was just so brutal, really.
yeah.
Um, and so just his performance on the song itself, even though it's a slow plodding song, it's a little bit better riff. It's a little bit better performance because there's something behind this song. I don't know what it is per se, but they, like you said, it is the single. It does stand out. Um, and just the way that they're all playing this song. Just there's a little bit more emphasis in making it sound heavy and slow because we've already listened to at least 6 on the Black Sabbath 13 and 2 already on this one. But
Mhm.
what makes this one stand out? Because this one is slower than Fear, you know, probably as slow as Adam and Evil, and slow is definitely is stuff that's on 13. But why does this stand out differently? It's just performance. This the guys playing and the way that they're playing.
Mhm.
So it's I like the song um when I'm in the mood for that. So it's definitely a what was the word I'm going to say? It's definitely is a favorable song for me.
Okay. All right. So track 4 is Double the Pain. What kind of stood out for me with this one was it almost sounded like it could be a Judas Priest song. You tweak it a little bit for Rob, and yeah, it's a Judas Priest song. I really like the pace and the energy. it's kind of a good step away from the mostly doomy sound. It's a little bit more fast paced, which is nice. So there you go. Like you talked about having a little bit of diversity. We're 4 tracks in. We've got a single track, and we've got something a little bit faster paced and kind of sticking out a little bit more.
I like this song. I like the chorus. It has a good hook to it. Um, I actually, it's a very melodic pre-chorus. I like the way he builds up to that part when he gets into Double the Pain. It is the most up-tempo song on the album so far, although that will change. So there's something about it. I like Geezer's performance, the production where you can hear him standing out just a little bit more on this song. Actually, on this whole album, you can hear him a little bit more than you can on 13, which I like. So there's that part of it. So I think this is a pretty cool song. Actually, this is one of those where like as soon as I heard the riff, I'm like, oh yeah, this is Double the Pain. Like I could recognize it right off the bat. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah. Track 4 is Rock and Roll Angel. It's a good riff. It's a decent track, but a little bit cliche. The lyrics are great until you get to the actual words "Rock and Roll Angel." Ronnie would use rock and roll in different songs, like not as bad as AC/DC. But like, I love the solo on the song. So it's a mixed bag, but like for the most part, like I really want to love it, but I just like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about like when you start throwing in the word rock and roll into the title of a song, it's kind of like, what are you expecting now? Kind of thing,
Yeah.
with AC/DC, it's kind of like understood because AC/DC has much like Iron Maiden has a certain cheese to them. AC/DC has their own brand of cheese, and they definitely know how to hit it, and they specifically hit it when they all their songs have something with rock and roll in it.
Yeah.
But that's that's so it's funny because they're AC/DC is a big especially Angus, they're big fans of old style rockabilly. I mean, they covered Chuck Berry's School Days. That's the kind of music that Angus grew up on, right? And that's what they did back then. They love to not pronounce, but they love to announce that songs were rock and roll. And it was like, yeah, we're gonna do this rock and roll, and that was the whole style. And it was something about that, and so AC/DC has kept that over the years. So when you hear other people, because Ronnie was older, obviously, and so are the rest of the guys in the band. Vinny's the youngest, but that whole thing about rock and roll, that was his thing. I mean, he was a rock and roll singer back in the day. We talked about that before we started recording. So it's one of these things where it kind of goes along with something that Ronnie would do, So the song itself, it's kind of like, it fits within the album. The lyrics, the chorus kind of makes it slightly cheesy. It's one of those, all right, let's move on kind of thing, it's okay. But yes, Tony's solo is pretty cool.
I wish AC/DC really did have their own brand of cheese, though.
Maybe not.
Okay, so track 6. Apparently I didn't take too many notes on. I do like the song though, so it's really cool. Like the lyrics and the overall riff really kind of stuck with me. So what I like about it is, I mean, it's kind of a takeoff on the turn of the screw story. So it's only about 100 years old, so I won't give you any spoilers. Give you plenty of time to go out there and read it. But maybe that joke didn't land, but but yeah, like
I think it landed.
one thing that Ronnie does, is he can take a story, an existing story, kind of like Iron Maiden does, and he can craft it into something different, and you're listening along and you're getting the thematic aspect of the story in the song. So I think he does that very well. And if the song intrigues you, go listen or go read or listen to. I guess there's probably an audiobook version of Turn of the Screw.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. Once you
If
get past,
not, I'll record it. You know,
we'll listen to you. We'll listen to you recite the whole
stumble through
book.
it.
That's great. So with this song, once you get past the slow intro into the mid tempo verse line, then the melody's pretty cool on that, and I like that part of it. And Dio has this knack for a good chorus. You mentioned it earlier. We were specifically talking about fear. He has a way. I mean, to turn one word like fear into something that's got a hook. Ronnie has this knack of making just about anything a hook. While fear didn't necessarily hook me in, this one was pretty cool. So I give him that. I'm not I didn't read Turning of the Screw, so I'm not really familiar with how it all goes down. So I'm not going to talk about the lyrics so much, but I thought the song wasn't bad. It was better than I had previously given it credit for.
Okay, well that's cool. Track 7 is Eating the Cannibals. This is another kind of high energy, kind of breaks up the slower, heavier moments while fitting in well with the album and the surrounding tracks. If you like songs like Time Machine from their early catalog, that being Black Sabbath's early catalog, I say early. It's Dehumanizer, so it's not early, but earlier.
Earlier than now, yeah.
Yeah. Then you'll probably love this one too. It's fast, it hits hard, it has another good solo, and there's a section right out after the solo that's probably one of my favorite bits. There's like this really cool modulation, and it's another one of these things I pick up on where it's like most people probably don't even notice it, but it's like the guitars are almost overlaid and they modulate kind of like back and forth. And if you're not listening for it, you might not catch it. But it like go out of your way to listen to that section, like just right after the solo, and it's like super cool, like one of those earworms. That, again, like tickles the brain is what I say about it.
I'll have to check that out because I didn't pay enough attention to that part of it to say, yeah, okay. I mean, I've heard the song over and over and over again, right? But like, I've never listened to it on headphones, or I never sat for 5 minutes just to hear that song. So,
Yeah, no, I get it.
So I like the song. I mean, fastest song on the album. To me, my favorite song on the album.
Okay, cool.
As you mentioned, it definitely reminds me of something off of Dehumanizer. And funny, you're talking about the time period. Dehumanizer is about 20 plus years into Sabbath's career at that point.
When I say early part of their career, I'm thinking like of this lineup.
And even then,
it's not.
No, I think it's 14 years after with this lineup. It's just crazy.
It's just misspoke.
Maybe that's maybe like 12 years after. Yeah, it's just wild though when you think about the different timelines in the years, because Dehumanizer, they were apart for several years and then they came back. So but yeah, no, I like this song a lot. I mean, it's a pretty cool song, and I think Tony's having fun with it in terms of the guitar playing and stuff like that. He has some really good trilling on the guitar solos and stuff, and the little licks that he throws in there. So it's a pretty cool song.
Yeah. So track 8 is Follow the Tears. Kind of more back to that doomier sound, though it's more of like a dirge or a march. So there's even like the little drum beat that you hear in a lot of marches. With this, it's interesting though because it's got this kind of sense of chaos and energy at the same time, like urgency, like because there's this spike going on, like a almost like an alarm, and so like what's interesting is it makes you feel all these different things, like how can it be so sludgy? How can it be so slow and urgent at the same time? So it gives you this sense of like something's coming after you, almost like a Michael Myers or something, that you can't stop, but it's coming for you. Like, so that was kind of cool. Like, you get this feeling of like something impending doom or something.
I get that. I get that. This song to me has got one of the craziest, heaviest riffs out there. Like, it is crazy heavy.
Agreed.
I mean, it's so heavy, it's almost like it's grungy. And there, it's most guitar players in the modern era know how to get that low, almost a B in terms of notes to get that really, really low sound. But then there's also that distortion that goes along with it. Tony still is a traditional guitar player, so he's can only tune it down so much. You can only distort it to the way he thinks it feels comfortable for him. But it's still so grungy and sludgy and heavy sounding. It's crazy how that sounds. And other than that, I mean, the song it's a pretty cool song, but it's just the sludginess it's so powerful in that regards.
Yeah, it's really super heavy. All right, track 9 is Neverwhere, um, which sounds like software that never got developed. Um, it's a decent track, but for me, like, the fatigue has kind of started to set in. It's got a good energetic solo that really kind of tilts the score on the song up a little bit for me. And then another thing that stuck out to me is the excellent bass mix. It's not a supernatural. It's not a super memorable track, but it is still a good listen. It feels like something that could fit on Dehumanizer again, and maybe a little bit more energetic than that album as a whole. But yeah, fatigue's kind of setting in for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's a mid to up tempo number. It's a good song, like you said. It's not necessarily memorable, but it's what was the word that you used just a few minutes ago to describe the song?
It's
Uh,
energetic.
no, you said gradual, energetic. I don't remember. I have it down as a good song. It is. It's definitely one of those where, like, again, yeah, the fatigue has set in. Although although it's good, there's just nothing. It's kind of like stock standard. Um, it's decent. Nothing stands out about it, but it's nothing that's saying, "Oh, this is a terrible song." So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, and then our final track is "Breaking into Heaven." I would say it's a cool epic closer for the album. A bit slow paced, but fitting ending for Dio's career. Another fantastic solo. It kind of fits that theological theme that we're hearing throughout this. But there's something kind of fitting of Dio's last song being "Breaking into Heaven."
that is pretty interesting.
It's a little poetic and nice way that both of these albums kind of go out on a poetic note.
Exactly. For me, this song is very similar to all the other slow, sludgy songs. It's that whole style. The whole album is doom metal for the most part, so it fits within this album the way it's supposed to. So,
Okay.
all right.
Um,
So, what's your assessment on this album?
so I think the production really works and it nails the sound of this iteration of Sabbath. I feel like the chemistry of the band and the songwriting is pretty good. Like, I really enjoy how well they're working together. It's not like an A+ album by any means. I would say maybe like a B plus. I think it goes like for the cohesiveness gives me a little bit better um you know feel for it, I guess. um it's not, to me, what sets it apart, I guess, from the Black Sabbath or 13 is it's not grasping at the old. It's just kind of writing the next logical step of their career. Because if you listen to Heaven and Hell, then Mob Rules, then Dehumanizer, and this, it actually makes sense, even though there's like these giant gaps of time between. But like, it's almost like they just listen to their old stuff and goes, "Oh yeah, we'll just keep going from there." So, yeah, well, it's really doomy, and you and I both aren't like the biggest doom metal fans. I think it works.
I mean, for the most part, I think the album works, especially if you're into doom metal. Both albums would easily classify as doom metal, and this one, has its diversity. It's more, for the most part, it's more diverse than Black Sabbath's 13.
Hmm.
Um, and just while both of them have up tempo numbers, Eating the Cannibals is far and away the fastest of any of the songs that we've listened to. I would almost say Methodemic is probably the second fastest song out of all the songs that are on these two albums.
And sadly,
So
it's not even
it's
on the
right,
main
and
album.
it's
Yeah.
exactly, it's a bonus track. So
Well, before we go into like what we think is best, let's talk about what we think about the individuals. Like I mentioned to you, I would like to talk about drums versus drums,
right.
guitars versus guitars, etc. So, you want to go first?
Yeah, let me do the drums first because I think I have a little bit of a different take than you do on Brad Wilkes playing
Okay.
on this on 13. I mean, both Brad and Vinny are amazing drummers. Um Obviously Vinny's been doing it for a lot longer. Brad, to me, is a little bit more able to handle progressive sounds and progressive songs better than Vinny.
Hmm.
Um and it's weird because you pointed out some things about the production. Um there there's there to me there's different nuances about each instrument that are different for both albums. um and obviously it's two different time periods. I mean, we're talking about 5 years apart, for the most part. um but I like Brad's sound on the album. Um, Although it's not necessarily his sound, they're trying to replicate a Black Sabbath type sound. But I liked his performance because there was, like, for instance, on Live Forever, he was doing a lot of the cymbal work and riding his ride cymbal, stuff like that. So there was some touches there that harkened back to old Sabbath. Not that he was trying to be Bill Ward, but he was trying to get something in the style of that. Even though Bill Ward, his drumming is very different in terms of of style. So for me, I like Brad's performance, to me, over Vinny's on these two albums.
Oh yeah, I'm way the opposite. I think you were correct. Like Brad's playing itself is great, but the production kills it for me. It sounds like he's playing modern drums over Black Sabbath tracks, and that's what kills it for me because when Bill Ward was playing with them, and that's the style that they're trying to harken back to. The style's the same, but the sound is way off. So it's just if they had done the production better, I might agree with you, but I just don't. I think they nailed Vinny's sound on the Heaven and Hell album, and the biggest sore thumb that stuck out to me as I listened to all of 13 was, well, I'll go into the other part later, but one sore, I guess there were two sore thumbs. Both thumbs were sore. Um, but one of the biggest two that were bothering me was the drums. So I think it's a disappointment for me.
Oh, well, sorry to hear that. What's your take on Geezer's bass?
Um, it's funny. You said earlier on that you felt like the bass stuck out more on Heaven and Hell. I kind of felt the opposite. I thought on 13 the bass stuck out a bit more for me. And maybe it was because I was listening with headphones. I don't know. It could have been something like that, but there was just more like if there were 7 really great moments in Heaven and Hell, there were 8 and 13. So it wasn't much of a difference for me, but like I kind of tipped it in favor of 13 for bass.
Interesting, because I'm the opposite. Obviously Geezer plays on both. So
Yeah.
where to me his bass production on The Devil You Know is a little more punchy. For me, it's a little bit more audible.
Hmm.
And so there's just certain parts of songs where I can hear his fingers plucking in that regards
You
to
can
his
hear the
performance.
fingers picking.
So, and for me, that gives the performance edgewise to The Devil You Know. And that's not to take away from the performance
Yeah.
so much. It just gives it to edge. I mean, Geezer plays great on both of them, but I think he's a little bit less uh, encumbered on The Devil You Know. I think there's a little bit of freedom on that one. Like, they obviously, at that point, they hadn't recorded anything in quite a while, as either as Heaven and Hell or as Black Sabbath.
Mhm.
Um, and so when he got together with Ronnie, I mean, he doesn't have to come up with lyrics, which is probably a ease on his shoulders in that regards. So he's just out there playing and having a good time.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think that has a lot to do with who's producing it, because they produce it themselves. But when they get to Rick Rubin on 13, there's kind of like this guy who's trying to tell him what to do. And sometimes that can affect your performance when you're not necessarily happy, or you're not necessarily um, feeling your best, because you're having these disagreements. I mean, sometimes those disagreements lead to brilliance when it comes to performances,
Hmm.
um, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't think that's the case here. I just think that there was a free feeling with The Devil You Know, where it's so much for 13, it was more like we have a job to do. We have to
Okay.
try and sound like the old Sabbath, where on Devil You Know, he was like, we don't have to sound like the Sabbath Dio era, but this is who we are.
Fair enough. Okay, so guitars.
So Tony's the riff master, right?
Hmm.
Tony is the guy who writes all the songs, and this is all his riffs, and he knows how to play them better than anybody else. So his performance on both albums is outstanding. I mean, what can you say? You can't really take anything away from it. Although I would say, for me, the performance that he has on The Devil You Know, there's a little bit more experimentation, I guess you would say, on The Devil You Know than there is on 13. Where on The Devil You Know, he's going in there, they're producing it themselves. They've written the songs. This is what they've got. This is their chemistry. All right, let's put it on tape. When they're doing 13, it's more of like, we have a job to do. We're trying to do this. We're trying to get these songs to sound like this. We're trying to get these songs to be in the vein of this, that, and the other thing. And so there's a little more structure, I guess, in that way.
Mm.
So I think there's a more freeing performance on The Devil You Know than there is on 13. So I think personally, his playing is a little bit better on The Devil You Know, although he sounds great on both.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much wrote the same kind of notes. Notes.
You
You
cheated
know,
off my chest? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I cheated. No, I mean, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the lack of cohesiveness in the songwriting in 13, where it's like he has a lot of ideas, but they're not joined well together. So it just feels a little choppy in places, maybe a little clunky. But for the most part, like I like everything I'm hearing. It's just I'm giving it a little bit more into Heaven and Hell on this one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm coming up with on that one. I give it to Heaven and Hell. All right, so what do you think about the vocalists?
Dio wins in the vocal department, like just hands down. And the reason being is, like I said, Ozzy felt like he was calling it in, or phoning it in, I guess is the correct term. But um, there are moments of greatness where, like, there's a few tracks where you hear like Ozzy's emotion kind of at the end of the song, and he's pushing his vocals. But there's so many moments where you're just wanting it to hit that next level, and it never does. And I made the comment a few times about the way his phrasing was. It just up the scale, down the scale, up the scale, down the scale, and it started to get to me after a while I'm listening to it, where I was almost getting just irritated listening to it. And Dio was pushing himself and trying new things and doing stuff beyond what he had done in the previous years. And this is at the very end of his career. And I like, if I'm gonna pick one or the other, I think Dio way outperformed Ozzy on this particular set of albums.
What's interesting for me is, like, you look back and you listen to Ozzy's albums,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously you can tell that over the years things have changed,
Yeah.
right? And so you get to this point, and while his perform like I agree with you in terms of the way the melodies are, and the up and down on the range. I don't think all of that is his fault per se. Um, but he, and because he collaborates with Geezer on the lyrics and coming up with the melody lines, that is his fault in some instances, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, while that is the weakness of his performance, I would say that his performance overall is very strong as far as his coming out there and performing. Like you've heard the last few albums he comes out with, and to me it's all just kind of forced. And Black Rain, the one of the solo albums towards the end of his regular part of his career, if you want to put it that way. um those performed that's when everything began to start sounding forced with him.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, you can tell like he was his pitch, on his last few solo albums, his pitch was higher, very similar to the way it was in the beginning of his career. Um, he sang with his high pitch, but with this Black Sabbath album with 13, you can tell it was a more mature Ozzy with a lower pitch in his voice, a more controlled singing more than anything else. But it wasn't as good as what Ronnie did on
Yeah.
The Devil You Know. Ronnie is just an amazing performer, an outstanding lyricist, an outstanding vocalist, and like I said, with Bible Black, I mean, the emphasis on black and just getting that K to go all the way through, it's that's the way Ronnie is, and you can never deny the style in which he sings. I mean, he's always emphatic. He's always giving it his all when he sings. I mean, I think I saw a video the other day. You may have showed me, or someone showed me a video of Ronnie, and he was doing like it was a parody of something, or it was something comedic. And he goes, "Oh, you want me to do it like this, right?" And he starts singing it in his typical Ronnie James Dio style, which is always over the top, right? And it was like, this is like listening to a Dio song, but it wasn't his song. He was just like saying something over like a jingle almost,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so cool. That's who Ronnie is. He never phoned it in.
No,
So
never.
in that case, and I give the performance to Ronnie because of how it's just there's just always on. He's always on, I guess, when it comes to performance. He's always ready to give that best, the best of what he has.
Best of his love.
Really, you went there.
um, yeah, I mean, I'm in 100% agreement. So, um, what do you think between the two albums?
This is really tough because both of these albums are slow and sludgy. Um, I you know, the two of them, they're two different bands. Even when it was Black Sabbath, it's two different bands. I mean, Tony and Geezer, and for the most part, you can say it was Bill and then Vinny. They are different performers with Ronnie at the helm, as opposed to Ozzy at the helm. Now, Vinny never played with Ozzy, but Vinny's played with Bill, and it's they're just two different styles. It's absolutely, which is amazing that they decided to both do doom metal albums. Um, I'm at a toss right here because I really don't know which sludge is sludgier than the other that makes it better. I mean, performance wise, I probably would say it's going to lean towards Heaven and Hell because because of Ronnie's performance, because of Tony's ability to be a little bit more free. Um, I like. I mean, I'm going to go with the Devil You Know because I believe the songs, between Eating the Cannibals and Double the Pain and Bible Black, those three songs, as a unit of being the best songs, are better than the better songs God Is Dead and Live Forever on 13. So I'm going to go with The Devil You Know.
Okay. I mean, I think you probably know where I'm going with this, but while both albums have some theological themes, I would say Heaven and Hell takes more of a mythological and theatrical approach, while Black Sabbath takes more of like a street level, personal and realistic approach. So there's similar themes, but very different way of going about them. It really speaks to like who each vocalist and songwriter are. Obviously, um, Geezer is the primary lyricist when it comes to Black Sabbath, whereas Dio is the primary lyricist. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
lyricist.
right.
Yeah, I just my brain shorted out for a second. But the vocally, they're very different singers as well. And you're right, it's two very different bands. But the things like the drum sound, I know I'm harping on it, but that is something that really stuck out to me. The cohesiveness of the songwriting is one of the biggest things, though. There's a lot of really good ideas on Black Sabbath, but it just did not, really just hit it for me. Like it would be going in the right direction, but they never got there. So I'm going to give it to The Devil You Know as well.
There you go, folks. There you have it. We have chosen The Devil You Know. So, and it's funny because there's a lot of things that we could say, obviously positives of both albums, but I think one just has enough to continue to say more good things about it than the other. So, all right. Well, that brings us to the point. We haven't done this in a while. The Big Four. So, now that we stopped doing all these, 10 most important, we're getting back to what we do best, which is talking bullshit. But we haven't done a Big Four in a while because I felt we should leave the 10 most important to stand alone on their own. So plus, trying to come up with the Big Four of the 10 most important something of whatever, it was just going to be weird. Whatever it may have been, to narrow down from 10 to 4 when we already just went through a top 10 countdown. What was the point? So anyway, today we've done Black Sabbath before, we've done Ozzy before, we've done Dio before, in different formats in different ways, but I don't think we've done it this way. The big four Ronnie James Dio songs of his career, period. Whatever time period that you and I have chosen, it could be from Ronnie and the Redcaps, it can be from Elves, Elf, whatever, all the way up to Black Sabbath and Heaven and Hell and all the others in between. So um, I'm going to go first and let you cap it off because I know Ronnie James Dio is one of your favorite singers.
Okay.
So for me, when I look at my favorite Dio songs, all right, so number four for me is going to be Kill the King from Rainbow, off of the Long Live Rock and Roll album. Just it's one of those songs that it's such an up tempo song. It really gets you into the groove. I really like Ronnie's performance on that song. Number three for me, The Last in Line from the Dio band. I remember seeing that video, the elevator, the kid, all that, and it was just the different dynamics of the song, from the slow intro to that heavy, powerful riff. I love that song. One of my favorite Dio songs in general. Number two for me is probably the first Ronnie James Dio song that I can recall or remember, especially with his Dio solo band, Rainbow in the Dark. It was a big video on MTV. It was playing all the time. Love that song. Just the keyboards, everything about it. The guitar solo is incredible from Vivian Campbell. So love that song. But number one for me is probably one of my favorite Ronnie performances on vinyl, on wax, on tape, on whatever you want to call it. Children of the Sea from Black Sabbath off of Heaven and Hell. I just love that performance. I love the production on that album. I love the production on that song, his vocals, the falsetto he uses. And then when he hits those lower notes in that register, it's just everything comes together for me on that song. I love that song. So that's my big four Ronnie James Dio songs.
So that's a good list. I think we have one song in common. But my big four, number four is going to be Time Machine, the version off of the Wayne's World soundtrack. It's one that always stuck out to me. I like it better than the album version. I've talked about it before on multiple episodes. That was one that in my early life, an early metal song that I heard, and Wayne's World was a factor of, getting me into metal among other things. And, that song just kicks ass, especially that version. It's definitely better than the album version. My number three is Starstruck from Rising. People love Stargazer. People love some of the other songs on the album more. But something about Starstruck always stuck out to me, and I've just always been a really big fan of that song. I think it was the first Rainbow song that I ever remember hearing, in fact, so maybe that's a factor. My number two is Last in Line. I think that was your number three.
Yes.
Last in Line, just a lovely intro to the song. It has good meaning now. I remember watching something after Ronnie passed away, and they played that song, and it was just really, one that just always stuck with me, but now has even more meaning. And then my number one is Neon Nights off of Heaven and Hell. Such a great opener. Always one that I just absolutely loved. That's if I'm gonna pick one album from Dio, that's probably my favorite of his. But just it was one of those moments that, like, I'm a big opening song guy. I like that initial attack, the excitement of it. So it's just one of my favorites. So there's about 8 other songs I'd like to have on this list, but you can only pick 4.
Yeah. So it's funny, we both had a song off of Heaven and Hell. We both did Last in Line, and we both did a Rainbow song. You did 2 Black Sabbath songs. I did 2 Dio songs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. I like that. All right, debating metalheads. Well, this concludes our head-to-head of 13 versus the Devil You Know, and that is the end of this episode of Debating Metal. Remember to listen to us whenever you want to. Okay, hold on. Remember to listen to us whenever you want. Tap, click, or smash that like, subscribe, follow, or download button on your favorite podcast platform.
All right, so I'm going to say something before I go into my usual spiel at the end. So we've had a few weeks where we've been on and off and this and that, and I feel like I'm mostly to blame for that. So I took a new position in my company that is taking a lot of my energy and time right now. So thank you for bearing with us and continuing to listen to us. And, those of you who continue to interact with us, I really appreciate it. So thank you for, the patience of us getting out episodes a little bit slower pace. Hopefully, over the next few months, we get back to a normal pace. So thank you again. But I just want to say, don't forget you can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new show. So remember to check out the next episode where we'll spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe. What the fuck was that?
Sorry, it was my I hit the headphone.
I thought you farted.
No.
On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
What the hell are we doing? We'll see you next time.